Welcome once again back to the lab. It is your old Professor Pilk, and I want to come back here and discuss something that we talked about the other day. That is the potential of maybe the Nintendo Switch getting a version of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. Very specifically, now a lot of you guys commented that the Let's Go games were already released on the Switch, and so there's no point. I disagree entirely. Now, I see your point. Yes, you are absolutely correct. We do have a version of Kanto on the Switch. We have the Let's Go games, but let's be fair, that is not the same thing as getting Pokemon Red and Blue. Not even close. Not remotely. Now, the Let's Go games are a watered-down version of the original two games. And what I mean by that is the game is kind of dumbed down for a younger audience. That is not a bad thing. That is definitely not a bad move. What those games are designed to be is an entry-level game to get younger audiences into the game. Because let's face it, if you're like, put Legends Arceus in front of an 8-year-old, they're not going to have any clue what to do. That game is incredibly difficult. Scarlet and Violet obviously is much more akin to a modern iteration of a standard Pokemon release, but with the glitchiness and all that, it can be frustrating to play sometimes. I personally found it enjoyable, but I'm also an adult. Kids don't tend to have the same level of attention span. So when you've got something like Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu, yes, those are fantastic games for a younger audience. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're discussing, and the big kind of selling point to all this, is what you're going to be getting with, if I'm correct here, is the original Red and the original Blue, just like it was released on the Game Boy. Why is that important? Well, number one, that is an entirely different experience. What you are getting is you're getting the game as it was played 25, 30 years ago. Well, not 30, obviously, but we're coming up on it. 28, for all intents and purposes. You're getting the game that was originally released on those consoles, was originally designed to be played a certain way. You are getting an experience. Now, some people mentioned, oh, this is another way to get their money. They're not getting any money out of you. What this is this is going to come to anybody that has the online service, to those emulators. I have the NES emulator, I have the SNES emulator. This is essentially going to come to the Game Boy emulator. So, if you're already paying for the online services and all that, I think, I could be wrong, but I think the Game Boy emulator is included. I'd have to double check that. But if you're paying for the online services, odds are you just have access to those. Now, there's an even bigger reason, and many of you kind of already know where I'm going to go with this, but I'll discuss later on, that I think is the number one reason that you're absolutely incorrect. But I don't disagree that we already do have Kanto. Kanto's not what I'm looking for. The original experience of Game Boy is what I'm looking for, because once again, most people do not have an original Game Boy. Most people do not have an original Game Boy Color. There's going to be some people in the comments section be like, I've got mine. You are a rare exception, a very rare exception. The vast majority of players, go find anybody right now with a PlayStation 3. Go find anybody right now with a Wii or a Wii U. Most people, when they upgrade their consoles, or a console breaks or whatever, they just scrap the old one. I am a console collector. I've collected every single console that I have ever owned. I have collected and I've kept, with the exception of the couple that were unfortunately stolen from me, but that's a whole other story. I keep consoles. I'm a collector. Most people are not. And so if you try to if you go today to buy, what blew me away is when I bought my 2DS. I bought my 2DS with a lot of Pokemon games on it, Pokemon Bank, and a few other things, and that set me back $600. Not for a 3DS, for a 2DS. That is an insane amount of money for that console. An absolutely ridiculous sum. Now, mine was worth it. It came with a bunch of Pokemon games. It came with the Pokemon Bank. We made a ton of content for the channel on it, up to and including what I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But essentially, what you're getting is you're getting that experience. An experience that very few people are going to be able to have in the modern realm of gaming. Now, let's kind of diverse from this, or digress, I guess, a little bit from this topic for a moment. Discuss why I feel it's this way. Because some people did question. They think it was just Mewtwo's birthday. Let me kind of show you the tweet here one more time. And pay close attention to what's happening over here, okay? So, it was Mewtwo's birthday. Happy birthday, Mewtwo. You know, and it's just the shot of Mewtwo from Pokemon Red and or Blue. It doesn't really matter. It's just Mewtwo appearing. It does not say happy birthday, Mewtwo. It says, get ready, trainers. And they didn't give you, let's go Eevee, let's go Pikachu. They didn't give us a Terra Raid. They didn't give us anything here from the modern realm of gaming. They gave us the classic. Now, people have data mined the Game Boy emulator, and they've known for a while that the Gen 1 games are in there. It's great. Awesome. But they have not been accessible. Now, why is this a big deal? Arguably, it's not a huge deal, but it is a big deal for someone like me who's a classic gamer. This is the game that everyone who started Pokemon when it first came out started with. There's a lot of people that are Pokemon fans today that have never played this version of the game. They've never had access to this version of the game. They have never understood where Pokemon came from. Now, a little bit of my backstory. I came to Pokemon very late. When I was coming up, kids who played Pokemon, they had a stigma about them. So I never got into the gameplay. I never got into it. I loved RPGs. I played other JRPGs. But at the time this came out, being where I was as a gamer, I had a Sega Saturn. I had PlayStation. I had all the newer consoles. And we were playing things like the new Final Fantasy games. We were playing, Panzer Dragoon. We were playing all that kind of stuff. We weren't playing Pokemon as an RPG. Now, on my old YouTube, when I say old, my main YouTube channel, Raptor's Delight, many years ago we did a subscriber push, and you guys said you wanted me to play Pokemon. And I said, fine. So I went out and I bought a copy of Pokemon Red. I actually bought it from a local guy off of eBay, picked it up, drove it back, and we streamed it. What blew me away, and this is the thing a lot of people don't consider when they consider all this, you have to remember that those cartridges had very, 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 very little space compared to what a modern cartridge or even a modern CD, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever, has to offer. These cartridges were tiny. What struck me is how much story, how many unique characters, how many, even though like now in the modern realm, like obviously coming across Bugcatcher 47 times isn't that impressive. But they could only program so many mobs in there. They could only program so many monsters in there. They had a handful of slots. I forget how many exactly, but there were a limited number of slots. The fact they were able to program 151 and still have room for more, case in point, like your missing nose and stuff like that. You know, a lot of the Glitchmon are references to Mon that don't exist but could potentially exist in the game cartridge. So, what blew me away is how much Nintendo, Game Freak, whatever, was able to cram into this tiny little cartridge. You know, and when people first got the Game Boy, what were they playing? They were playing Tetris. What is Tetris? Randomized blocks, falling, and it just gets faster and faster. It's not a big deal. Even Mario, very repetitious. Some of the later levels are almost identical. You have a handful of mobs. JRPGs on a handheld like that at the time, very, very rare. Now, this kind of did come in at the tail end of the Game Boy's lineage, I guess you could say. But nevertheless, this is an important game. This is the game people need to know. People need to understand. People need to be aware of where Pokemon has come from. And that is, I think, arguably one of the biggest factors in this. Now, the other thing I'll mention here, and this is kind of my closing argument to all this. Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu, the Let's Go series being what it is. is good and all. But for shiny hunters and people who, I guess, are willing to take exploits into their own hands, go back on the channel back a few months ago. I dropped a series of videos using my 2DS where we talked about, during the Mewtwo raid on Scarlet and Violet, how to get a shiny Mew from Pokemon Red and Blue into Pokemon Home. And it's a hell of a process. It is an insane undertaking. This would make it so much easier. And with that same exploit, you could pull out every single Pokemon in Gen 1. Every single one of them. And there's even ways to glitch it to get Pokemon that aren't necessarily in that version of the game to still spawn and generate and to convert them into shinies. You could do all that inside this cartridge. And what we're going to get is essentially a virtual version of that. So if you are dedicated enough, this version that's coming, where I paid $600 to do this, you guys are going to have it on the online version, essentially for free. Because you're using the online. You're using your online access for other stuff. This is essentially a golden opportunity for shiny hunters. This is essentially a golden opportunity for glitchers, for people that are really looking for every argument, every exploit, every possibility. Believe me when I say transferring from Pokemon Bank to Pokemon Home is a nightmarish undertaking in some of the easiest of circumstances. It can be nerve-wracking. Ask me later on when I'm transferring some of my GameStop exclusive shinies to Pokemon Home. We'll cover all that next month. Nevertheless, that is the other thing that's going to be dropping here. And if you're asking yourself, well, why won't they fix it? They never have. They've never bothered to fix those glitches. And I don't think they, at this point, care. So few people do it in comparison to how many people have access to these games. So few people even know about those exploits. Which is proven that every single time I drop a video on it, you get hundreds of people who have never heard of this glitch before. Because it's not, if you're not actively looking for it, if it's not something you're actively looking to pursue, you're just not really going to know to take advantage of it. So this is literally opening doors for the Pokemon community. Like it or not, that is what it represents. This represents an opportunity. This represents history. This represents what Pokemon came from, what Pokemon could be, and this represents taking basically Pokemon going forward into the new realm. Now, arguably, we are coming towards the end of the Switch generation. There is got to be something new on the horizon. I think we all fully expect that. In fact, I've got a video coming out here later on, probably this weekend, talking about other games and things like that that are coming and what this means for the generation to follow this. But better late than never. This is a fantastic move. And I think at the end of the month, when we get our big Pokemon Day reveals, Red and Blue will be added to the game, but probably instantly, in fact, because they've been sitting there for a while. And that, I think, is fantastic for the Pokemon lineage. I think this is fantastic for the gamers. This is fantastic for people that have never played Pokemon before, that are coming into it the first time. This is a history lesson. This is a tool. This is an exploit. And frankly, this is just the best possible thing we could have this many years after the original games dropped, and how incredibly inaccessible they are. Have you priced a Pokemon game recently? An old Game Boy game? Minimum $100, and that's if it's in nonsense condition. The games that I've been collecting, I'm so glad I collected them when I did, because if I tried right now, prices are through the roof. It's a popular franchise. And this is our history. This is what we're getting. Like, comment, share. I'll be back with more Pokemon everything. And Battle World, because I'm loving that too. Whatever. So, love it or leave it, it's here. And we're going to cover it. So I'll be back with more coming up here real soon.